just a hack. He's just an absolute hack. And he gets his ass kicked by his teammates every week. It's just, it's terrible. It's just terrible.
Welcome back to another episode of the Believe in NFL Draft Prospects podcast. I'm Joe DeLeone here with NFL draft analyst Ryan Roberts, who has the camera presence of a high schooler, apparently putting his hand on the camera to start the show. Ryan, we're back from vacation. We got to work out the kinks a little bit. I know I definitely need to. How was your vacation, by the way? How was Myrtle Beach?
It was good, man. I didn't want to come home.
I feel you.
I
feel you on that. Yeah. We're getting close to the football season, so opportunities for vacations are slowly dwindling.
I know, man. I know. Myrtle Beach is so much fun because there's everything you need in like a 5-mile square radius. It's insane, man. It's like every bar known to man, every restaurant known to man, like 2 different malls. They have a little like boardwalk thing where you walk up to like 6 different bars in like a half-mile radius. They have just a lot. I mean, a million restaurants, ice cream places. Like, it's nuts, man. Like, you can do anything in Myrtle Beach. Yeah.
And Coastal Carolina is not too far.
Yeah. We drove past Coastal twice, and it's a pretty nice stadium. I've never been to the stadium, but it looked nice from the outside. So
yeah, them and their very ugly turquoise turf, very interesting.
You don't like it? You don't like that turf?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of the colored turf bit. I think it works.
Even Boise's, like the blue, man.
Like that looks goofy too, and the Eastern Washington red.
Well, that's awful.
Horrible.
The Inferno's awful.
Horrible.
Yeah. The Inferno's too bad. That's really bad. I like the original Boise State one though. I thought that was different. It was unique, and then Eastern Washington tried to do the Inferno, and I was just like, no.
Yeah, that's trying a little too hard, and I guess it runs in the family for those Midwestern schools that try to look a little cool. The former
Is that Midwest? Is that Midwest? It's a little out west, man.
Kinda. Maybe it's more Western. My geography's terrible, so don't quote me on that. Today, though, Ryan, we are going to be talking about Jalen Carter, the likely top 5 pick from Georgia, and then we're going to be talking about Bryan Bresee from Clemson. I don't know how I managed to almost mess that one up. Who was formerly one of the top-rated recruits. I think he was a number 1 recruit at one point for one of the scouting services, right?
Yeah, he was number 1 on at least 247, but it was probably more. I mean, the kid was just stupid in high school, man. He's playing edge at like 6'5", 300 pounds. Like, it was just insane, man. Yeah,
stupid. We talked about, and I even posted the Paris Johnson highlights, and that got some good run on our YouTube shorts and our TikTok and whatnot. The Paris Johnson highlights were funny, watching him kick the crap out of a bunch of little goofy high schoolers. The Bryan Bresee highlights, man, I think rival Paris Johnson's, maybe even a little bit better. I remember watching Bresee, who looked like he does now. Like, he looks like he does now as a senior in high school, and he's just tossing kids. Like, I pray for any 5'11", 250-pound high school lineman trying to block him.
Nah, man, it's been – Bryan Bresee has almost been NFL ready since he was a senior in high school, man. Like, it didn't make any – I mean, does he look substantially bigger than he was in high school? Like, he looks just the same. Like, he's just a hulking guy, and he's just been that way. And, I mean, I can't wait to talk about him because he also moves a lot better than you would think a 6'5", 300-pound guy, man. He can scoot a little bit. So, fun times with Bryan Bresee in high school.
We've got 2 total dogs that we're going to be talking about on today's show. Before we get into that,
speaking of a Georgia Bulldog, that was a good pull there, Joe. I like that. Like that bit, man. It was good.
You can't just let me transition, brother.
Sorry, I'm done.
No, I'm just kidding. No, I was thinking that in my head, and I'm like, no, it's gonna be a little too ham-fisted. But go ahead. All right, I want to tell you folks about our partners at Bet Online, which continues to be our source for all of your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including NBA Summer League, of all things to bet on, Major League Baseball, and the latest fighting news, and even next season's early NFL futures. If you're like me, I've actually gotten pretty good at betting baseball. I'm on a 70% streak of getting my picks right lately, Ryan. I've been making a little bit of cheddar out here on these baseball bets. It makes it a little more fun because it's too slow for me. Baseball's pretty boring. If you want to do that, head to their website or use your mobile device to sign up today to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code BELIEVE to get the bonus and get in on the action. Bet online, where the game starts.
Who decided that cheddar was a symbol for money? Why isn't it like provolone or something?
Is it because Cheddar's sharp? That's a good question. I mean, there's probably some stupid backstory.
Provolone could be sharp.
Yeah. Maybe because
I think
provolone's too hard to say. Maybe
I
because
think any
Cheddar's.
cheese could be sharp. I think.
I'm sure it would like a lot of jargon and slang. It's just one of those things one guy said, and then everyone just pretended it made sense, and then it just kind of picked. That happens all the time.
So like the echo chamber of draft Twitter.
That's one way to. we go from the processes of developing English terms and idioms to the echo chamber of draft Twitter.
I saw another good one that I forgot to send you earlier. By the way,
is it a take? What's the take?
No, it wasn't a take. It was a someone was talking about the body mechanics of each position or something. I'm just like, Jesus Christ. Okay.
That's a new one. That's a fun one.
Yeah, it's fun times.
Ryan, Jalen Carter
from
Georgia has been brought up early on as a likely top 7 pick. Let's say top 7 pick. And
you can say top 5. You can
top
say top
5.
5. Yeah.
Top 5. If I'm playing it safe, 7, but I think top 5 is very likely for Jalen Carter. The one thing that I heard immediately as soon as we transitioned to this 2023 cycle in like the first week of May was that Georgia lost Jordan Davis. They lost Trevon Walker. They lost Devontae Wyatt. They lose all these guys. And you kept hearing college football analysts and draft folks talking about how Jalen Carter is the best amongst the group. And I watched him, and after I watched him, I certainly agree with that. He is, I think, with those guys that we just mentioned, there were concerns of if they could all stay on the field 100% of the time. And I think Jalen Carter is the exception amongst those guys. He deserves and belongs on the field for all 3 downs because of how freaking disruptive he is. If you look at his stats, he is not a guy that has a stupid stat line. This is not a Will Anderson, but man, does he cause problems, and he set up Devontae Wyatt and Jordan Davis for a lot of the success that they had last season.
I mean, and his role in the defense is not designed to put up those types of numbers, right? Like he's not designed to be Will Anderson. I think the first thing, Joe, because I forgot to tell you this, I have 2 very flattering comps for each of these players today. I have 2 that came to mind very easily, and there are a couple comps where I think people are going to be like, whoa, guy, can we settle down here a little bit? And it's fair, but we'll get there in a second. The first question is, and the more important question is, you like number 88 on a D tackle?
I wrote that in my notes and I was going to bring it up, but was he a tight end in high school or something? That's
probably.
was he playing wide receiver?
You never know, man.
Probably,
I mean, honestly, yeah. No, it's a weird aesthetic. But I kind of liked it. I mean, I think most guys, if they wore number 88 playing defensive line, would be like, no, that's not a thing. But
you got to be a dude if you're going to wear 88.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, so Joe, let's go to the positives, right? He's listed at like 6'3", 310. We don't have the verified measurables on him yet, but he's not the longest guy of all time, right? Like he's got a little more of a bowling ball feel almost to him, right? But like I think his length is fine. I think it's good all the way around. It's not like a
but
deterrence or
very, very thick and toned. Doesn't look
he is very filled out for only being what will be a true junior in college, and he is explosive, man. Like he is, I would say, twitchy, right? Like he changes directions really quickly for a guy his size. He's explosive off the snap. He's got hand and natural power. He's got hand violence. Everything's there. Everything is there. I would say, there's some things as far as taking on double teams and remaining, leverage consistently, but the movement skills are just silly, man. Like this kid this is one of those rare players where I think as an interior pass rusher, his numbers from a sack perspective and from a tackle for loss perspective will be a lot better on the NFL level once he gets into a 4-man front that asks him to attack the quarterback, right? So he is an incredibly explosive bowling ball. Like, let's call him he is that type of dude. And my comp for him it's a throwback, Joe, Warren Sapp. He reminds me a lot of Warren Sapp, man. And Warren Sapp is a Hall of Famer. So, I'm again, Not saying Jalen
very
Carter.
generous.
Yes, not saying Jalen Carter is going to be a Hall of Fame level football player, but like the best things about Warren Sapp that I remember is not the lengthiest guy, kind of had that bowling ball feel to him, but just a ridiculous athlete for his body type, like just moved unnaturally for his size, right? So that's who I see. I think that this kid could be a double-digit sack artist at the next level, which is very hard to do for a defensive tackle, a true defensive tackle.
Yeah, and I'm so curious to see if he can up that production not only this year but once he makes it to the NFL. But he almost doesn't even need to because of the value that he can provide. The one thing that I really loved about watching Jalen Carter is the hand usage, and that swim move that he has is deadly. He's got one of the quickest swim moves I've ever seen for an interior defensive lineman. Like, he is so strategic where he places his hands, just almost swiping and just pushing guys out of the way, using their momentum effectively to create one-on-one matchups with ball carriers or eventually more opposing blockers. That is what is so fun to watch on him. And he's also got a really good rip move. The ability to use multiple moves as an interior rusher is rare. And that's, I think, what provides the most value, because you just don't find guys that have that skill set, especially as a true junior. And like, how many guys do we talk about with the edge rushers that we were saying needs to add more moves to their arsenal? I say for an interior guy, if you got two good moves, man, that's big ups for a defensive tackle, because most of the time they don't have a ton of moves.
I think the things that makes him a rare player, in my opinion, and I agree that there's definitely more of a pass rush plan than your typical sophomore entering junior year now. But man, he's twitchy and he's flexible. Like, because the one thing that for guys to be able to hit multiple moves in a rep, right? Like, they are going to get their body into a certain position. They're going to kind of diagnose that, like, hey, there's more space to this direction, or I have to hit a move to kind of create that space. And he's able to just contort his body unnaturally for a guy his size, right? So, like, rare athlete, I think, for the position. I wouldn't be surprised if this kid's like a 4'8", 4'9" type of dude again. I wouldn't be surprised if they have back-to-back just silly testing numbers from their defensive tackle. And this kid is, I mean, literally, he can get skinny. He can change direction. He can hit counters. He has strong hands. There's really, if you're trying to poke holes in Jalen Carter, because we didn't talk too much. I mean, we talked a little bit about this about Will Anderson, right? You can poke holes in Will Anderson's like frame a little bit, right? Because he's a little bit smaller. He's a little bit unique in that way. What hole are you poking in Jalen Carter, man? Like, again, I think that anchoring against double teams is at times, right? Like, I think that his hand placement in that regard isn't the best. I think that he can get displaced occasionally working against multiple blockers. But you're really nitpicking, man, because like most guys don't just anchor against double teams consistently. Like, that just doesn't happen, right? I really do think that people are going to just say like, oh, production. But if you watch how he's used, it's not the way that it's going to be used on the next level. Like, he's not going to be asked to work against double teams, to two gap, to do those types. On the next level, you're going to look at Jalen Carter and be like, you're a three technique. You're going to split gaps. You're going to work one-on-one blocks, and you're going to attack the football. That's what you're going to do. And when he hits that role, I mean, what's the negative? Is there a negative? I don't think there's a negative here, man. Like, he is about as easy as an evaluation as he might be an easier evaluation than Will Anderson, in my opinion. He might be easier. Not saying that he's a better player, but I'm saying, like, I think the most novice of evaluators, most novice of scouts can watch Jalen Carter and be like, yup, he's really good. Like, I don't have any because we joked about it, right? People are going to poke holes in Will Anderson, and it's already happened. It's weird. But people, I think, are going to have a really hard time to watch a Jalen Carter and be like, nah, he's not that good. He's overrated. What about him's overrated? Like, I don't like the profile's fine from a physical perspective. Was the best defensive lineman on a team that had 3 first-round picks last year on that defensive front.
Which is nuts to say. Exactly.
And he's nuanced, he's powerful, he's explosive. Like, what are the hangups with Jalen Carter? I think it's a really easy evaluation.
To wrap up Carter on that note, Ryan, I think at the very least, if he doesn't develop in the NFL into a high sack production, tackle for loss production, defensive tackle like Aaron Donald. Like that's what you're hoping for with a top 5 pick defensive tackle. That's what you want to get. If he doesn't develop into that, if he can do what he does, taking on double teams, not only taking them on, but blowing them up to the point where they can't move him off the line of scrimmage. That's a loss for the offensive line. If 2 guys are occupying 1 defender that can't move off the offensive line, if Jalen Carter does that at the next level, that's still worthy of a top 10 pick. If Derek Brown went as early as he did to the Carolina Panthers, Jalen Carter is justified for going just as early if he doesn't turn into that high-level production. And Derek Brown's great. He's actually been really, really good for the Panthers. It's just he's never going to be a high production type of a player. And I don't think we need to sit here and nitpick Jalen Carter for that reason. I'm telling you right now, if I see this stupid bit where people go, well, he hasn't really produced at Georgia, look, I'm losing my damn mind. I'm coming for all those people that try to do that stupid bit.
Double-digit sack guy potentially at the next level. I'll give you I don't want to say it a low-end comp joke because I'm about to throw in another comp for him. That's a kid that just made all pro last year. But the impact I see of him, I think at worst, you're looking at like a Jeff Simmons from Tennessee, right? Where last year I looked it up. I mean, Jeff Simmons had 8.5 sacks and 12 tackles for loss in 17 games, which is a good number, but that's the most he's ever had from a sack tackle for loss production, right? Like usually he's a 4 to 5 sack a year type of guy. And he's strong. He can do things in that regard. But the thing that I love about Jeff Simmons when he was coming out of Mississippi State is he was just so strong, but once in a while you just get a flash of like, wow, man, he just split that gap and he made a huge play in the backfield. And I think that that's at worst what Jalen Carter is. I think not only is he a high ceiling player, he's also a high floor player. And those players are rare, man. Like usually we're talking about guys that are high ceiling, low floor type of players, right? Jalen Carter is not that. Jalen Carter is a high ceiling, high floor player, which again is why I think it's a pretty easy evaluation.
Bryan Bresee from Clemson is also a very easy evaluation. We were talking about how this is a guy who was a top recruit, was just bodying kids and justifiably so. And the reason why some of these guys will be considered to be top recruits over others is because of how far along they're developed. And Bresee, as we were talking about earlier, feels like he's been developed and built to take on those double teams and dominate along the defensive line. A couple other things that I noted with Bresee, Ryan, is that he is very funny to watch because they love to just move him around. And I know that they're going to have a new defensive coordinator, but he was playing 0 and he bounced from 0 to 3 to 5 to even all the way out to a 7 technique, which is freaking fantastic. That is what you want in a first round, early second round defensive tackle, is a guy that knows how to play and line up at different points on the defensive line. He's probably not going to do that at the next level often, but he has that capability and that experience in his arsenal, being previously a true freshman starter.
This is so Jalen Carter, in my opinion,
yes,
is a preferred 4-3 player, 4-down player, I should say, and even front. While I think that he can play in an odd man front, it's not advantageous to him.
Yes.
I don't think there's any limit to that from Bryan Bresee.
No.
Like he could play, like you said, I wouldn't play him as a 0, but like he could play anywhere from 1 to 5. Like he could do that pretty convincingly. Like think about how Pittsburgh Steelers still run a lot of like multiple fronts where they're playing 3-man, they're playing 4-man. I think Bryan Bresee can do all that type of stuff. He's a Cam Hayward type of player. I'm not comparing him to Cam Hayward because I actually have a different comp that I like a lot better. But like he could do that as like a 3-4 defensive end who can also play 3 tech. He can also play 1. He can do all those types of things. He reminds me of, though, and I think I put this one on Twitter a little bit ago. So like this one isn't like, here it comes. Ndamukong Suh, like I see that player.
Was he also 6'5"?
Yes. I mean, Suh was big. He was like 6'4.5", 6'5", long. And he was the thing that reminds me a lot of Suh from Bresee is he has just got grown man strength, man.
Yes.
Like he, you'll have a player try to reach block him and he's fighting pressure with pressure and he just puts his dudes on skates, man. And you're just like, that's not ordinary. Like he's a strong, I don't remember. Do you remember exactly where he's from, Joe? Because like he plays like a farm boy, man. Like
I think he's from Maryland. I'm pretty sure.
I think you're right.
It's like not even really.
Is it DeMatha Catholic? Is it DeMatha?
He's from Damascus.
Damascus. I'm sorry. Yeah. So Damascus. So yeah, he's a Maryland guy, and he plays like he's just grew up out in Iowa. You know, out in like the cornfields. Like he was just kind of like throwing hay over his arm and just running around. Like that's how he plays, man. He is a physically impressive dude. And then the movement skills for his size is rare, man. Like like you said, there's times where he's lined up at 7 and he's running like an outside track and you're like, oh, my guy's got a little juice to him. Like I called Jalen Carter twitchy. I would call Bresee explosive and long, right? Like he knows how to run tracks, and he is a tough dude to kind of counter with that length and that explosiveness that he has. I don't think that he's going to change direction necessarily as well as a Jalen Carter, but I think like if he splits a gap, man, he is out of there with the strength that he has and the explosiveness he has. So I think the important part to talk about him, Joe, is because these things, like, we're not directly saying 1 versus 1. Like, we're not saying Jalen Carter versus Bryan Bresee anymore. Like, we're not really doing that action. But I do think there's something merit here to saying right now Jalen Carter is the higher prospect, in my opinion, right? Bryan Bresee is a first-round player, though, all day long. The question is, if Bryan Bresee hits his ceiling and Jalen Carter kind of stays the same or maybe gets a little bit better, can we have a conversation of who's the best defensive tackle in this class? Do you think Bryan Bresee could challenge him? Because I do think he can. I'm not predicting it, but I think Bryan Bresee has some rare traits, man. Like, he's a rare player from a talent perspective. Hasn't fully put it together because of some injuries, and I mean, because he missed a majority of the season last year, and
he's had multiple injuries.
Yeah, and Clemson does misuse him a little bit, right? Like, it's not like a fully transparent kind of projection. But I think the best of Bryan Bresee can absolutely rival the best of Jalen Carter, in my opinion.
I definitely agree with that. And we've also seen more of Bryan Bresee, and he was immediately impactful right away as a true freshman. Just some quick other like last notes on his play style and some of the things that like, you're talking about that power, like that, the ability to just continuously like powerful leg drive, to keep doing that when he's being blocked. Like that stuff is really, really freaking rare. And you almost do wonder how, if maybe he can add a little bit of juice as an outside pass rusher, if he can develop into that. The only thing that I'm going to push back like a little bit on, if I think that if he's going to deserve to be in the conversation with Jalen Carter, I am reluctant to do that, and I don't want to do that because of the lack of availability we've had from Bryan Bresee. Like we only had 3 and like a quarter of games to go off of last year, and last year's ACL injury wasn't the only injury that he sustained, if I remember correctly off the top of my head. Like that really concerns me. And sometimes it kind of happens with these guys that are early developers and are step in right away. They play so much football early on that they're not always healthy. They're getting hit a lot. They're getting banged up a lot. He's on the field a lot more than Jalen Carter was last year. Those injury concerns is what is going to hold me back, and why I might actually, and I hate doing the injury concern bit, and Sean, my co-host on the FCS show, always gives me a ton of crap when I do this. But like I have to take it into consideration because it's not super consistent.
Yeah, look, I said Jalen Carter is a high floor, high ceiling type of player. Bresee definitely has a lower floor. I don't think that there's a floor where he's just going to be a bust per se, but could be a reality where he's just a Lamar Houston. Like, he's a good football player, but he's not a great football player. Like, I do think there's a little bit more of volatility to his profile. I agree completely to that sense. I just do think, though, that like for summer scouting wise, I'm going to buy into the athleticism and the talents that Bresee has. You have to hope, obviously, he puts together a full season. It's going to be a new defensive system, new defensive coach, obviously, with Venables going over to Oklahoma. We'll see what it kind of works out. But the other good thing, too, Joe, is usually a guy like, and you mentioned this on Twitter earlier, usually a guy like Bryan Bresee, you're like, okay, double teaming him every play. But when you have Miles Murphy, Tyler Davis, Xavier Thomas, KJ Henry, all these defensive linemen, it's hard to just go, yeah, we're going to focus on that one guy. So I do think Bryan Bresee is going to get a lot of one-on-one opportunities this year if he's able to stay healthy. So I could see him having sort of a transcendent year for him and being a top 10 type of player. Like I think that he has that type of upside, but I agree that the peaks and valley are a little more spread out than, let's say, a Jalen Carter, for instance.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that, and I'm excited to watch both these players this upcoming season. I think we've got some other fun defensive tackles that we're going to discuss this week who maybe don't necessarily fit as high of a ceiling as both these players. I believe the next one we're going to be doing is Keanu Benton and Saki Ika from Baylor is the one that I have written down. But this defensive tackle class, very fun to watch, very fun to evaluate, and we're going to be getting to that more in the coming weeks. Folks, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back soon. And follow us on Twitter at Joe DeLeone, at Rising Draft. Sorry, I got bombarded with messages, so something popped up in the corner and I got distracted. At NFL Prospect, at NFL Prospects Pod, Hack City on YouTube, and subscribe wherever you get us on your audio.